Hey there, indie authors. Welcome back to Indie Author Blueprint, where we talk all things indie publishing with a business mindset. I'm your host, Michelle Rayburn, and today we're diving into something that every authorpreneur needs in their toolbox: habits, systems, and sanity-saving hacks for productivity and organization. I recently spoke on this topic for writers at a conference, but now I want to specifically apply it to the author who is in the business of publishing their own books. There are additional tasks that you need to complete, and there's another level of organization that you need in order to be able to succeed in that. If you're planning to publish your work and reach a wide audience, then you have to treat your writing like a business. I've said it many times on Indie Author Blueprint. It means it's getting serious about not just your craft, but how you manage your time, your files, and your brain power. Let me introduce you to someone. I'll call her Jane. Jane is passionate. She has a cozy mystery series in progress, a historical novel half-drafted, and a few freelance articles floating around. Sound familiar? But Jane has a problem. She's a digital squirrel. She saves files everywhere: desktop, downloads, Google Drive, even her email inbox. Her file names are things like chapter1-final-final.doc or use this one I think.doc. She doesn't use folders or dates or backups. And worst of all, she jumps into new drafts when inspiration hits, but never finishes the last one. Then one day, Jane decides to submit her manuscript to an editor as she begins her self-publishing journey, but she can't remember where the final version is. Was it final, or final, use this one? The outline for the series, that she left at the coffee shop in a notebook. Some edits on a dead laptop. All the feedback from her beta readers lost in some emails. And she still needs a marketing plan and a cover designer. She has no idea where to start. Jane is talented, but she's also stuck, stressed, scattered, and instead of writing, she's constantly searching, redoing, and second-guessing. Or she's scrolling Amazon and shopping for new shoes. Eventually, she starts to wonder if maybe she's just not cut out for this. Here's the thing. Jane isn't failing because she's not good enough. She's just missing systems. And that's our big takeaway today. This is a 2-part series, and we're going to be covering some habits and organization. A lack of habits and organization doesn't just waste time, it clogs your creative flow. Now, let's be real. Life happens. I've had seasons like that myself. In fact, recently, new grandbabies, unexpected travel, family stuff. You can't control everything. But when the right habits are already in place, then recovery is possible. You'll bounce back faster. So let's think of it this way. Let's not fight our flaws. Let's design for them. You don't have to become some hyper-disciplined person to be successful. You just need systems that interrupt your worst habits and support the way your brain naturally works. For example, if you're distractible, maybe Pomodoro sessions would work for you. We'll talk about that in the next episode. Perfectionist, maybe templates and good enough checklists will help you. Drowning in ideas, you could limit your active projects to 2 and keep a parking lot for the rest. You don't need fancier tools. You need better defaults. So we're going to be talking about that. Today, we're going to walk through some core productivity systems, not apps or tech, just habits that you can implement right now so you can write and publish with more intention. So let's dive in. System 1, hack yourself first. Most writers don't need a better app. They need a better approach. A system is something repeatable. You don't have to redecide every time. And that's huge because decision fatigue is real. So raise your right hand and say after me, I'm not disorganized. I just don't have the right system for how my brain works. All right, then let's get practical. System 2, the next action hack. This is for overthinkers and procrastinators. If you have vague to-dos like work on chapter, these don't work. Your brain doesn't know where to start, which chapter, where in the chapter, what was I doing? So instead, one method is to end each writing session by jotting down the next action. Right in the manuscript, not on your to-do list, right there where you left off. You could put it in bold and red, whatever you need to do, right in the manuscript. So it might say something, not continue editing, but fix transitions in section 2. You might keep it on a sticky note if you don't want to write it in your document or you're writing on paper. It could be a comment in the document if you really want it on a piece of paper on your screen, whatever works for you. Again, this is for what works for you. You could have a dedicated next up list, but this tiny trick of knowing where you left off and exactly where you're starting again next time makes it easier to start the next day with action instead of scrolling somewhere on the internet. System number 3 is the 2-project rule. This is for multitaskers and idea chasers. If you have a lot of open projects, this equals unfinished projects. So one of the things that helps is to limit yourself to 2 active projects. Some writers and publishers refer to this as kind of a back burner method, but others think of it as a parking lot document where you keep a list of all the things you'd like to do as ideas come to you. I love to use notes in my phone. You could keep it in a running Word document, but you'll have one primary, like your current book draft, and a secondary, like some blog posts or social content. Or maybe you're working on a nonfiction book and a fiction, whatever, it could be books or it could just be articles or smaller projects, but you're keeping 2 of them going so that when you get bored or stuck on the one, you can switch to the other and you're continually making progress forward on both. But then the rest of the ideas and projects are kind of in that parking lot folder. So they're there when you're ready to pick them up, but you're not like constantly going all over the place and not finishing anything. Now that's a parking lot document. Some people call the next action hack a parking spot system. So I want to delineate a little bit here. A parking lot document is a list of projects that might be coming up, and a parking spot is where you left off. So that's the one where it's like pointing to what you're doing next when the next time you open a file. Okay, let's talk about system 4, the reverse calendar method. This is for deadline dodgers, and this is one that I've used. I used to convince myself that I was best under pressure. I know I'm not best under pressure. I have meltdowns. I don't plan for interruptions. I get impatient with people. I don't do my best work, even though I used to convince myself I did. And I know that other writers try to convince me they work best under pressure, but I do compilations and I get those submissions that come in right before the midnight deadline on the date. And those are often the ones I turn down. They're not well thought out. They're not put together as smoothly as that author thinks they are. And so if you think you work best under pressure, then set an artificial deadline and pretend that's the real thing. And don't skip that deadline, really stick to it, because that'll give you a little bit of time to rethink it before you submit it. We tend to plan based on our ideal timeline. We think that ideally it's going to work this way, and publishing is about real dates. So this means there's going to be hitches that come along the way. I had all kinds of problems, especially with the first book that I released, and it did not release on the day that I thought it was going to. So I didn't allow myself enough time. I know sometimes when I'm working with clients as well, they think, unrealistically, they think they're going to have all this editing time that they don't. So one of the things I encourage people to do, especially when they're planning their publishing project, is to plan the whole thing out, reverse engineer it. I do this whenever I bid out on clients I work with, because I have to know, where am I going to do that in my schedule? I can't promise them I'm going to have their book finished in 8 weeks, from editing to cover to interior to releasing it, if I don't know where that's fitting in the schedule. So I start with the date we're releasing. I work backward to the date we're meeting to upload. I work backward from there to when they're reviewing the final proofs, go backward to when they're looking at the galley copies, to when I'm doing the design, to when I'm doing the cover, to when I'm doing the editing, and then they're writing. All of that. We reverse engineer backward so we can see how much time we need. Then I add some cushion, because I always need more time than I think on some things. And It's always nice to finish early if we're ahead of the deadline. So look at the last possible day that you can get something done and then work backward from there. Put the dates in your calendar, whether it's a physical, I use a digital calendar and I put blocks of time in there. I treat those like work time. So unless I'm moving them to the next day, just to swap out recreational time and work time, whatever, but I'm not canceling out those because I want to meet my deadlines. That has been a game changer in how much I accomplish. Okay, let's look at system number 6. This is also one that's really helpful for me in tracking progress. This is the project pathway. This is if you're struggling with figuring out the next steps. So if you were writing a book, you might have 4 to 6 checkpoints that it goes through, like brainstorming, outlining, draft, revise, formatting, launch prep. But every time you start a project, you need to know where it's going and where you are. And in a publishing project, there's so many steps. It's not just the writing. Once you finish the writing, you have the whole business side of becoming the publisher. You're switching hats. And so you might have a whole system in order. It could be a checklist you're following of I've done the writing and then the editing and the cover design and then the interior formatting and all of that. It could be those things. Or what I like to do also is keep a folder system of the things coming up and the things I have in progress and the things I have done. And I slide them into there. Another example as a publisher, I do compilations. I receive submissions from other people, and then I have to put all of those submissions into a folder. So I put them into the drafts, like the manuscripts received. And then when I sit down to sort them, I start reading those manuscripts and I move them into either a yes, a no, or a maybe folder. By the time I finish, the initial folder is empty and I moved everything into the maybe, the yes, or the no. Now I see how many yeses I have. If I need more, I go back to the maybe. I start looking at some of those. What can we do to make this one work? That kind of thing. Until I get them all into, these are my yeses. Now I can send out contracts. I can notify everybody whether theirs has been accepted or not. And then as I send out contracts one at a time on those yeses, I then move it into a ready for editing folder. Now everything that's ready to be edited is sitting in one folder. As I edit those documents, I move them into edits completed folder. You see what I'm saying? It's like a Scrum system, like you might use on Trello or something like that, but I'm moving the physical files from one folder to the other until we get all down to these are the edited ones. Now I'm ready to create the finished manuscript with everybody's documents in there, and I'm able to begin the next steps on the publishing process, which is the formatting and all of that. Now I move to a checklist where I'm checking off on that one document. It's formatted, it's this, it's that, it's ready for publishing. I organize all of those. The cover files are in one folder. The interior of the book is in another. The design and everything for the ebook is in one. The marketing materials are in another. The manuscript is in one as well. I separate everything into those folders, and we'll talk more about folders and organizing in the next session, but I use those as a project pathway. It helps me to know where I left off. If I come back and I see I have 8 in the finished editing folder and I have 20 in the unfinished, I know I'm going to grab one of those, work on the editing, put it in the next folder. So it helps me to know where I'm at with a lot of moving pieces on a project. You get to apply these however it works for you. So if you are somebody who needs to hack yourself first and just know that you need a system, then you need to figure out what works for you, not the thing that works for somebody else. You might need a next action hack for that overthinker and the procrastinator. You might need a 2-project rule. You might need a parking spot for all of your ideas that you aren't sure what you're going to do with. You maybe need to reverse calendar a bit, or maybe you need to work on creating a project pathway. Where are you the most stuck? That's where you need to begin. So actually begin with taking a breath. You don't need to implement everything today, but you need to pick one system. and then try that out and see how you could implement that system in a way that works for you. Now, I know I said this is part 1, so I will share some specific tools and systems that you can use to manage your indie author business in the next episode. But remember, you're not behind. You're building something real. You're not just a writer. You're a publisher, you're a creator, a business owner. So I'm here to say you've got this, and I know you can do it. You just need to figure out what works for you. I also want you to think about the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about stacking habits. And so you stack a new habit on top of something you already do regularly. So let's say I want to remember to take my vitamins. I always grab a cup of coffee in the morning. So I might put my vitamins in a organizer, and I might put it right where I brew my coffee so that I can grab my daily supplements as I'm brewing my coffee. That's an example of a habit, and it works in the writing too. If there's something that I always do, I always open my computer in the morning. So if that's my first habit, I could leave my computer open the night before to the screen that I should be looking at first the next morning, not leaving it open to Facebook or something like that. So Atomic Habits, it helps you to look at the things you already are doing and stack something else onto it that helps you to make that a habit as well. So look at Atomic Habits by James Clear if you're looking for a book that has a lot of great info. If this episode helped you, share it with another indie author friend, and be sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss part 2. I also create little bonuses and extra application things for paid subscribers. So if you're a paid subscriber, keep scrolling in the email or the post that you see, because the bonus content always falls at the bottom there. There's a link to get it. If it's a worksheet, if it's a practical tip or tool, or it's an action step prompt for you, it's always there at the end. So if you are not a paid member already, I encourage you to do so. It's $8 a month and you get access to all the old content and new content. So if you are taking your publishing seriously and you wish you had a coach, this is your opportunity. I can't possibly coach all the people who approach me about that. So I've created Indie Author Blueprint as a way of being able to speak directly to you. For paid subscribers, you get to send private messages as well, so you can always reach out and ask a question privately to me or to the group on the chat in Substack, and then I'll answer that question if I can, and if it's something that would require coaching, I might refer you to the best resource I can. Thanks for listening to Indie Author Blueprint. You don't need fancy tools, you need systems that work every time. Start small, stay consistent, and remember this is your business, not just your hobby. I'll see you in the next episode.